Elijah Cole eased the tailgate down and lifted the first wooden crate onto the deck. The Georgia sun was just rising, painting the white farmhouse in pale gold. He paused, hands on his hips, taking in the rolling fields and the distant line of oak trees. This was supposed to be peaceful, a fresh start after years overseas. He inhaled, smelling pine and dew. Perfect. Across the gravel drive, a weathered man in faded jeans stood on his porch. A cigarette dangled from his lips, smoke curling into the morning air. He didn't wave or nod. He just stared. Elijah met his gaze for a moment, then turned away, hauling another crate inside. No words passed between them, but Elijah felt the weight of that silent greeting. Inside, he set the crate on a wooden floor and unlatched the lid. Family photos, a battered leather chair, and his grandmother's quilt rested like treasures. He arranged them neatly, letting the familiarity calm his nerves. He taped Georgia, USA in bold letters on a postcard to send home, smiling at the simple act. That night, Elijah sat on the porch swing, sipping black coffee. The cicadas sang, and distant headlights flickered down the county road. He listened for footsteps, but only heard his own breath. For a moment, he almost believed this town would welcome him. Then a flash of orange danced across the yard. He jumped to his feet. A wooden cross smoldered on the lawn, flames licking the charcoal wood. His heart pounded. He grabbed his flashlight and stormed down the stairs, chest tight. The cross fell apart at his touch, embers drifting into the grass. He kicked ash away, fury burning hotter than the fire had. At the sheriff's office next morning, he found a desk clerk with tired eyes. "Sheriff booked out," she said, tapping a worn schedule. "No deputy available." Elijah leaned forward. "My lawn was set on fire. That's arson." She shrugged. "No footprints. No proof. You're from Atlanta?" He nodded. "From Birmingham last month." She crossed her arms. "Might be kids messing around. You sure you want to stir up trouble?" He swallowed. Frustration roared in his chest. He tightened his grip on the counter. His mind flashed back to desert nights and jungle missions when a single spark could cost lives. He closed his eyes, remembering the rigors of Delta Force training, the precision, the control. He wasn't here to fight anyone, just to live. Not yet. Back at the house, he tore the quilt from his grandmother's crate and draped it over the porch rail. The sunrise caught its patchwork colors, red, blue, green, reminding him of home. He pressed a hand to his chest. He wouldn't run, not when he'd come this far. In the next hour, he inspected the yard. No child's footprints, no makeshift fire pit. Just scorched grass and unanswered questions. He loaded his kit into the truck. Tools, spare clothes, a notebook. He clicked the radio on low. Classic rock filled the cab, a reminder of simpler days. He drove into town, windows down, feeling every eye linger on him. At Murphy's Hardware, the clerk hesitated before sliding a deadbolt across the counter. "You folks need extra security locks," he said. "Some people don't like change." Elijah met his gaze. "Georgia's changing whether they like it or not." The clerk nodded, uneasy. As dusk fell, Elijah returned home. He locked every window, bolted the door, and checked the perimeter by flashlight. Every shadow felt like a threat. He found a spot under the oak tree and sat, back against rough bark. He closed his eyes and breathed, counting to 10. He wasn't just a retired soldier. He had commanded Delta Force teams in the deadliest missions on Earth. He had faced terror and chaos so extreme that a backyard crossburn was almost petty. Almost. But this was his land, too. He'd earned it. Tomorrow, He'd start building more than furniture. He'd build respect. He'd build justice. He'd build a life where fear had no home. He opened his eyes. The moon was bright. He stood and walked back to the house, carrying his grandmother's quilt inside. As the door clicked shut, he whispered to the silent walls, "Let them try again." There was in his voice a promise, quiet but unbreakable, that this commander would not back down. The morning came quiet, but not kind. Elijah stood at the kitchen window, watching a squirrel dart across the fence. He poured black coffee into a chipped mug and leaned against the counter, letting the silence settle in. The house was old but sturdy, with wooden beams that creaked like they remembered too much. He had plans, new locks, new gutters, maybe repaint the porch rail. But first, he needed to understand this town better. He drove down to Main Street, where American flags hung from every light pole, and the storefronts looked frozen in time. Murphy's Hardware, Daisy's Diner, and a barber shop named Lou's. He parked, stepped out, and felt eyes on him the moment his boots hit the pavement. A man across the street paused mid-conversation to glance his way. Two older women at the bakery counter went still. A paper boy slowed his bike. Elijah kept walking, calm, deliberate. He had done this before, in towns across the Middle East, in villages with too many shadows and too few smiles. He knew when a place was sizing you up. At Daisy's Diner, he took a booth in the back corner, facing the door. The waitress approached with a nervous smile. Her silver hair was tied back neatly. "Afternoon, sugar. I'm Mary. You new around here?" "Elijah Cole," he said, offering a small nod. "Just moved in off Bell Creek Road." She blinked. "The Henderson place?" "Yeah." "That house has been empty 2 years." She poured his coffee. "Ain't many folks move here without a reason." "I'm just looking for peace." Mary hesitated, then leaned closer. "Well, some here are peaceful. Some aren't." She looked around. "You might not get many smiles. Don't mean folks are bad, just stuck in their ways." Elijah offered a soft, polite smile. "I've seen worse." She paused, then placed a biscuit on his table. "On the house." After she walked off, he scanned the room. A man at the counter stared at him over his eggs. A couple in the booth near the window whispered behind their menus. Even the cook peered from the kitchen door. He ate quietly and left a generous tip. Outside, the sky was blue, clean, open. But every step back to his truck felt heavier. On the windshield, someone had smeared the word "leave" with their finger across the dust. He wiped it with his sleeve, then opened the door and sat in silence for a long moment. Later that afternoon, he stopped at the town's general store for some lumber, nails, and a roll of fencing wire. The clerk behind the counter rang him up without making eye contact. "Need help loading that?" Elijah asked. "No, sir. I'm good," the man replied quickly, and turned away before the receipt even printed. At the post office, the woman behind the desk asked for ID twice. "Just forwarding mail," Elijah said, patient but firm. "That's regulation," she muttered, though the sign said otherwise. He left with a tight jaw and a quiet mind. These weren't random moments. They were signals, low, persistent, grinding. People weren't yelling. They were freezing him out. Back home, he spent the evening repairing the fence and repainting the mailbox that had been scratched up since the night of the burning cross. He worked methodically, breathing through the tension in his chest. The sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. As he hammered the final nail into place, he noticed movement down the road. A pickup truck passed slowly, too slowly. Inside, Two white men stared out. The driver gave a smirk. The passenger had a phone to his ear. Elijah didn't wave. He just memorized the license plate and walked back to the porch, where he sat with his coffee again. The cup trembled faintly in his hand, but he held it still. Inside the house, he opened a worn notebook, military issue. He flipped past coded maps and logistics logs until he found a clean page. He wrote, Bell Creek, Georgia. First contact, passive hostility. Signs of systemic resistance. Surveillance begins. He tapped the pen once, then underlined, begins. The sun disappeared behind the trees. The crickets rose. The wind carried the scent of pine and something else, tension. Elijah Cole didn't scare easy, but he wasn't naive either. This town wanted to remind him that he was alone. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The first sign came before sunrise. Elijah opened his front door to find his mailbox twisted and lying in the ditch, its post snapped clean in half like a broken bone. The letters scattered in the grass were damp with morning dew, one of them torn down the middle. He stood there for a moment, just looking at it. No note, no message. But the meaning was clear. He didn't bother calling the sheriff. He already knew what they'd say. He picked up the broken post and the letters, carried them inside, and logged the incident in his notebook. Date, time, condition, weather, possible suspects. It was second nature, learned from decades of gathering intelligence in hostile territory. Except this wasn't Baghdad or Kabul. This was Bell Creek, Georgia. The next afternoon, as he walked out of the grocery store carrying a bag of apples and canned beans, he noticed the slashed tires before he even reached the truck. All four, cut wide open. A group of teenagers across the street laughed as they pointed in his direction. A woman at the bus stop looked away quickly, pretending she hadn't seen. He didn't flinch, just called for a tow truck, sat on the curb, and waited. It took 2 hours for help to arrive. During that time, 6 different people passed by, every one of them giving him that same glance, half curious, half smug. Not a single one offered help. When the tow truck finally pulled in, the driver, a white man in his late 30s, stepped out and frowned. "Damn shame," he said. "New guy in town, right?" "Yeah." "Figures," the driver muttered. "You want a lift back or you staying in town?" "I'll walk," Elijah said. He paid in cash. That night, the phone calls started. No name on the caller ID, just static. Then heavy breathing. Then silence. He hung up. Second call came 5 minutes later. "You should have left." Elijah sat still, the receiver in his hand. The line went dead. Third call. Racial slurs, growled through a voice changer or a cheap app. Laughing in the background. He didn't react. He just recorded the time, saved the audio, and added it to his file. They wanted fear. He gave them data. 3 nights later, he woke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of barking. Loud. Panicked. He grabbed a flashlight, pulled his pistol from the drawer, and stepped outside. A stray dog was running circles near his barn, barking wildly at something in the woods. Elijah moved silently toward the trees, light low. He heard movement, branches shifting, hurried footsteps. By the time he reached the tree line, they were gone. But he found the sign. Hanging from a branch was a crude wooden plaque with a word carved deep into it. "Get out!" He took it down, turned it over. Same message, this time burned in with a soldering iron. He carried it back inside, locked the doors, and placed the plaque on his workbench. He stared at it for a long time, then calmly began taking apart his field rifle, cleaning it by muscle memory. They were escalating. The following week, as he returned from town, he spotted something on his front porch. A dead raccoon. Gutted, blood pooled beneath it, its eyes still open. No one was around. No car sounds, no wind, just silence. And that smell. He stood there for a long time before reaching into his bag and pulling out a pair of gloves. He didn't panic, didn't shout. He cleaned it up, buried it deep, and sanitized the wood with bleach. Then he went inside and turned on his laptop. He opened his secure folder, encrypted, mirrored in 3 cloud backups, and uploaded the entire report. Dates, photos, audio, the phone recordings, tire damage, mailbox photos, animal evidence, video of the teenagers laughing near his slashed truck. He labeled the folder, Bell Creek Harassment Log, Active Threat Pattern. He had built cases like this in foreign lands. He knew how insurgents worked. Slow psychological pressure, silent intimidation, and finally violence, when they thought you were weak. But he wasn't weak. He was watching them while they thought they were watching him. At Murphy's Hardware the next day, the same clerk saw him walk in and immediately looked down at the counter. Elijah asked for a new lock, a stronger one. The man hesitated. Trouble with the door? No, Elijah said, calm and direct. Trouble with the town. The clerk didn't ask any more questions. On his way out, Tommy Briggs stood near the checkout. Heavy-built, red-faced, with a crooked grin and a cigarette behind his ear. He looked Elijah up and down. You the one bought the Henderson place? Elijah gave a nod. That's right. Tommy's smirk twisted into something harder. Heard you're not making too many friends. Elijah didn't blink. Didn't come here for friends. Tommy leaned in slightly. Then maybe you came to the wrong place. Elijah stared at him. Calm, steady, no fear in his eyes. Tommy took a step back, but the message was delivered. That night, Elijah replaced the door hinges and reinforced the window locks. He installed motion sensors across the front yard, set up hidden cameras in the trees. He wasn't running. He was preparing. Because this wasn't harassment anymore. It was the beginning of war. It started with the rumble of engines in the dark. Elijah sat in his living room, reviewing a satellite image of the property lines he'd saved from county records. His laptop cast a dim blue glow across the room. Outside, the wind had been still all night. No crickets, no distant dogs. Just silence. Then headlights. He closed the laptop gently and moved to the window. Through the slit in the curtain, he counted 6 trucks crawling up the dirt road. No license plates, no running lights, just torches burning in open beds. His breath slowed. Every instinct sharpened. They parked in a semicircle, boxing him in. Shadowed figures jumped down, 8 of them, all armed. Some carried bats. One had a chain. 2 more held bottles with cloth stuffed into the necks. Molotovs. Elijah moved quickly but calmly. He pulled his Glock from the drawer, checked the mag, chambered a round. His flashlight was clipped to his belt. In the hallway, he lifted the trap door to his storm shelter, but didn't climb in. He wasn't hiding. At the back window, he spotted 3 more men circling around. They were coordinated, moving like a team, but not professionals. Their formation was tight, but not smart. They hadn't studied defense, just intimidation. One torch hit the porch rail. Then came the first bottle. The front window shattered as fire bloomed across the hardwood floor. Elijah dropped to the ground. rolled to the kitchen, grabbed the fire blanket he'd placed weeks earlier. Flames licked the curtains. Another explosion rocked the side door. He was running out of time. He bolted through the back kitchen door, but two figures blocked the path. They rushed him. The first swung a bat. Elijah ducked, twisted, and drove his shoulder into the man's gut, sending him flying into the side wall. The second came with a chain, but Elijah grabbed the wrist mid-swing and drove his knee into the man's ribs. Then another Molotov burst in the hallway behind him. Smoke was filling the house. No way back inside. From the side of the property, a deep voice called out, "Come out, boy! Let's finish this like men!" Tommy Briggs. Elijah recognized the voice instantly. That southern growl soaked in beer and hate. He turned toward the shadows and fired a warning shot into the dirt. It only bought him seconds. 3 men charged. One tackled him. Elijah hit the ground hard, his pistol skidding into the dark. Boots stomped his ribs. A pipe cracked against his shoulder. They were on him, grunting, swearing, laughing. He landed punches. 2 of them yelped. 1 went down, but the others kept coming. Pain exploded in his skull. Then darkness swallowed him. When he came to, everything smelled like gasoline and rust. He was chained to a wooden beam in an old barn, wrists locked above his head. A single lantern hung from a nail, casting long shadows across dust and hay. The air was damp, cold. Outside, he could hear voices, laughter, boots crunching gravel. Someone slammed a truck door. Then they entered. Tommy led the group, smiling like he was in charge of the world. Behind him were 3 others, Ray Peters, Carl Dixon, and another man Elijah didn't recognize. Tommy crouched in front of him. "You finally awake, soldier?" Elijah didn't respond. "You fought like hell. Almost made me respect you," Tommy said, tapping the bloody tire iron against his knee. "Almost." Carl looked nervous, darting glances at the shackles. "We shouldn't have brought him here," he muttered. Tommy ignored him. "You know why you're here?" he asked Elijah. Elijah raised his eyes, blood streaking his cheek. "Because you're afraid." Tommy's smile twitched. "Number. Because you don't belong." He stood and walked slowly around him. "This is our land, our town, our people. We kept it clean for decades. Then you show up. Big city money, big mouth. Think you're better than us." Elijah didn't move. "Tell me something," Tommy said, leaning close. "What makes a man like you so stupid that he thinks a house on Bell Creek is worth dying for?" Elijah looked him dead in the eye. "You made a mistake," he said quietly. Tommy laughed. "The only mistake was not finishing this at your house." He motioned to Carl. "Get the papers." Carl pulled a folder from his coat and held it out, hands trembling. "Sign over the deed," Tommy said, "and maybe we let you walk. We'll even pretend this never happened. You can go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." Elijah stared at the folder, then at Tommy. "You think I'm just some guy with a pickup and a mortgage?" His voice was steady, quiet, dangerous. Tommy leaned in. "I think you're done." Elijah whispered, "I think you don't know who you've chained to this post." Tommy froze. "Elijah Cole," he said, "Delta Force. Retired commander. 27 confirmed missions. I've taken down insurgents who planned better than you. And I know your names now. I know your faces." The room went still. Even Carl took a step back. "I'm going to get out of here," Elijah said, And when I do, your town will never forget me." Tommy's knuckles whitened around the tire iron. "We'll see about that," he snapped. He turned and walked out, slamming the barn door shut behind him. Elijah exhaled slowly. His wrists burned. His body ached. But his mind was already moving. The fight hadn't ended. It had just begun. The chain was thick, industrial-grade steel, bolted through a rusted iron ring in the wooden beam. His wrists bled where the cuffs bit into skin, but Elijah didn't struggle wildly. He moved slow, measured, testing the give, counting seconds between guard footsteps outside. They were sloppy. They thought he was broken. They had no idea. The eye bolt in the wood groaned when he shifted his weight just right. That sound, the quiet crack of old timber, wasn't much. But to Elijah, it was hope. By morning, he had a plan. When Tommy and his men came back, they found Elijah slumped forward like he'd passed out. His chains hung low, motionless. They didn't see the tension in his shoulder, the exact angle of his foot planted for leverage. They didn't notice the beam had shifted. Tommy grinned and spat in the dirt. "Thought the tough guy had more fight." Frank Miller, the banker, stood by the door, pale and silent. His tie was loosened, his hair damp with sweat. "This is too far," he muttered. "We're talking federal charges, kidnapping, arson, assault." Tommy cut him off. "You paid for the gas that burned his house. You paid for the truck rentals. Don't pretend your hands are clean." Frank didn't answer. Tommy turned back toward Elijah. "Last chance. Sign the deed, or we let the boys get creative." Elijah didn't move. Tommy stepped closer. And that's when Elijah struck. With one explosive motion, he jerked his entire weight forward. The rusted eye bolt tore free from the rotten beam with a loud crack. The chain whipped around like a weapon. Elijah swung it hard, catching Carl Dixon across the shoulder. The man dropped instantly. Ray Peters lunged forward, but Elijah spun, wrapping the chain around his wrist and yanking it downward, smashing his elbow into the man's face. Blood sprayed across the wall. Frank screamed and bolted for the door. Tommy reached for the pistol on his hip, but Elijah hurled the chain like a whip, the metal striking his wrist with a sharp crack. The gun clattered to the floor. Now it was just Elijah, bruised, bleeding, shirt torn, but free. "You're done," he said coldly. Ray tried to crawl toward the corner. Carl groaned, rolling onto his back. Tommy stumbled against a crate, fury in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. Elijah didn't respond. He stepped over Ray's body and grabbed Frank's briefcase off the ground. Tommy lunged. Elijah caught him mid-charge, using his own momentum to slam him into the side beam. The barn rattled. Dust rained down. Elijah pressed his forearm against Tommy's throat. "You chained the wrong man," Tommy gasped. Elijah let him drop and turned toward the door. He stepped into the night, moonlight pouring down over the fields. He didn't run. He walked. Every step was calculated. By the time the others regained their senses, Elijah was gone, vanished into the woods behind the property, leaving nothing behind but bruises, broken pride, and a stolen briefcase full of their secrets. 3 miles west, hidden in a thicket he'd scoped out weeks earlier, Elijah entered a hunting cabin barely visible from the road. It was cold, dusty, but perfect. He locked the door, dropped the briefcase on the table, and went to work. Inside were bank records, personal notes, town maps, photos, even a printed membership list of the so-called Heritage Society, 12 names, addresses, phone numbers, donations, roles, threat lists. Some weren't just townspeople, they were connected, bankers, businessmen, even a retired judge. Elijah took photos of every page and uploaded them to an encrypted cloud server. He organized the files into categories: leadership, funding, direct action. Then he added a label across the top folder: Millbrook Operation, Counteraction, Phase 1. The next 2 nights were silent. The town thought he was gone, dead. But Elijah moved through Millbrook like a ghost. He tracked Tommy to a gas station at 7:10 a.m., followed him to Ray's auto shop, watched Carl leave for the dealership. He documented their routines, entrances, exits, weaknesses. He broke into Ray's apartment above the shop, left no trace, but planted 3 hidden mics and a mini camera. He entered Carl's office through the back window, found documents tying him to extremist groups across state lines. He left with copies and slipped out before the motion lights even flicked on. At Tommy's trailer, he found a locked room filled with guns, tactical gear, and printed manifestos titled "Preserve the County." One folder listed targets in neighboring towns, black-owned businesses, Jewish schools, a mosque. Elijah took everything. But before leaving, he added one small detail: a photo of Tommy, taken the night before, asleep in his chair. He printed it, left it on Tommy's nightstand. When Tommy woke the next morning, he screamed. The message was clear: I can reach you, anywhere, anytime. The men panicked. Ray stopped showing up to work. Carl fumbled through meetings. Tommy drank more, talked less, started jumping at shadows. They thought they'd hunted a victim. Now they realized they'd provoked a hunter. And the real war hadn't even started yet. The days that followed were filled with fear, but not Elijah's. As dawn broke over Millbrook, the sleepy town began to unravel. One by one, the men who had hunted him found their carefully constructed lives falling apart. Frank Miller, the banker, was the first to feel the weight. An anonymous package arrived at the federal courthouse. Inside, copies of bank statements revealing illegal transfers tied directly to financing the militia group. Authorities opened an investigation, freezing accounts and subpoenaing records. Frank's name was everywhere. His reputation, once untouchable, was shattered overnight. He stopped answering calls. His once confident voice became a whisper. Ray Peters was next. On a quiet Tuesday, he was found unconscious in his auto shop, a shotgun by his side, and a note pinned to the counter. You will feel what you made others feel. Police called it an attempted robbery gone wrong, but the message was clear to those who knew. Carl Dixon's home became a prison. Hidden cameras and listening devices recorded his every move. His wife and daughter were kept safe, but his nights were haunted by threats he couldn't explain. Elijah's evidence had exposed Carl's connections to hate groups far beyond Millbrook, ties that federal agents were eager to dismantle. Tommy Briggs, the ringleader, was the last. Elijah watched from the shadows as the FBI raided Tommy's isolated property. Weapons caches, explosives, and detailed plans for further attacks were seized. Tommy was taken into custody, his angry shouts echoing through the county jail halls. The town's whispered support for the militia faded as media reports spread. Neighbors who once turned blind eyes now avoided the group's gatherings. The Heritage Society dissolved under scrutiny, its members scattered and exposed. Elijah didn't celebrate. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, like the beat of a soldier's heart. He stayed off the news, off social media, but he watched it all unfold with a quiet satisfaction. One evening, he sat on his porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across his burned land. A local reporter approached cautiously, notebook in hand. "Mr. Cole," she began, "why didn't you run when they burned your home? When they chained you like an animal?" He looked at the horizon, voice calm but firm. "Because some battles don't end when the war does." He paused, eyes meeting hers. "I fought for this country overseas. Now I fight for my home." She nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind his words. "Do you fear they'll come after you again?" He smiled, a flash of steel beneath the kindness. "They already tried. I'm still here." The sun dipped below the trees, leaving Elijah surrounded by darkness, but standing tall. The war was over in the light, but his vigil had just begun. Months passed, but Elijah Cole's presence lingered in Bell Creek like a quiet storm. The burned house was rebuilt, stronger, fortified with steel doors and cameras that never slept. Neighbors who once looked away now nodded in respect, though few dared approach. Elijah walked the fields every morning, planting seeds in the soil and in the community. He spoke at local schools about resilience and justice, his words echoing in halls that had long forgotten hope. The town's wounds were raw, but healing had begun. One afternoon, a news crew arrived to interview Elijah for a documentary about resilience and survival. The cameras captured his calm face, the lines etched by pain and strength. When asked why he stayed, why he fought so hard, Elijah looked directly into the lens. "Because some battles don't end on the battlefield," he said. "They follow you home. They live in the silence and the shadows, but they don't get to win." He spoke of his Delta Force days not as a badge of pride, but as a reminder of discipline and duty. And he reminded everyone watching that courage isn't always loud. It's steady, persistent, and sometimes it's simply refusing to back down. As the interview ended, Elijah stood outside, the sun warming his face. Behind him, where the cross once burned, a new flag fluttered, bold, unyielding. He whispered to the wind, "I'm home now." And for the first time in a long while, Elijah Cole smiled freely. The fight had changed him, but it had never broken him. And in the heart of Bell Creek, a message was clear for all who dared to listen. No one owns fear. Fear owns no one. His story wasn't just survival. It was a beacon, a warning, a promise that the strong will rise, that justice will come, and that no darkness, no hate can silence a commander who stands his ground.